And of course, building relationships with foundations. So that's important. If a nonprofit organization already has a relationship or a history with a foundation, reach out to them and ask them how they intend to continue to support you during these times. Today, we're going to talk about trends in philanthropy and grant funding for 2025. So, with sweeping cuts to federal grants and federal departments under the Trump administration in 2025, the entire nonprofit world is undergoing rapid shifts. If you're struggling to get your bearings and keep up with philanthropy and grant funding trends, you are not alone. Hi, my name is Holly Rustick, and I'm the CEO of Grant Writing and Funding and the signature programs, the Freelance Grant Writing Academy and the Grant Professional Mentorship. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube so you get more information just like we're going to share today. I've been a grant writer and a fundraiser for more than 20 years. I also train and mentor hundreds of students inside the Freelance Grant Writer Academy. Our students and mentees are freelance grant writers who each serve multiple nonprofit organizations in different businesses, municipalities, and more. This means we have data from more than 1,000 different decision makers who are making decision makers. All of our clients and our programs have multiple clients themselves, right? So we're able to see what decisions are being made in grant funding and philanthropy in 2025 already as we're recording this in May 2025. This gives us an incredible and rare source of information about what is happening on the ground in grant making and philanthropy. So let's talk about government funding cuts leave major gaps. Will foundations fill it? Candid reports that 30% of nonprofits rely on government grants, and that foundations would need to increase their grant funding by 282% to make up for the loss of federal funding. And that would be of all federal funding cut. That's a hefty increase in revenue needs, and that just is not available. Don't worry, not all things are dire. So what are foundations doing to prepare for this potential inundation of financial requests when they don't have the available funds to fill the gap? Will there be an inundation of financial requests? Let's see what foundations are saying about grant making changes. So far, in 2025, foundations have been somewhat quiet on responses publicly, but this does not mean they aren't doing behind the scenes activity. From anecdotal evidence in our programs, grant writers are reporting that some foundations are reaching out to their nonprofit clients to ask, hey, would you like to have some more unrestricted funding, or just turn that grant that you have as a program grant into unrestricted funding right now? Or would you like to have more money available? Here's more money available. Amazing. Amazing. Not all foundations are doing this, but those that do have relationships are definitely leaning in. Another shining light for all of you grant writers out there when you're thinking about foundations and you're just thinking, oh my gosh, they're just inundated. Listen to this. We've also seen programs or collective movements like Meet the Moment, where philanthropic organizations are banding together to commit to move in solidarity with nonprofits with consistent funding and other capacity building resources. As of April 2025, more than 126 philanthropic organizations have signed this commitment to also increasing their percent of money giving out to nonprofits. And I've also been reaching out to certain foundations to come on the Grant Writing and Funding podcast or on the YouTube channel to share their initiatives, but many don't want that type of spotlight right now. It doesn't mean that they're not doing anything. It just means they don't want to be seen publicly right now. We could deem that foundations may want to remain a bit hidden as they continue their work, and maybe expanding funding primarily for current grantees. But what I have learned about 2025 is that assumptions can be thrown out the window. We need to see what the data is. And what we have seen is that nonprofit organizations are run by who? People. And people are making different decisions today than they did even a few months ago. Usually data about philanthropy and grant making trends is released months after all grants are signed and dispersed. But now conditions are changing too quickly for this type of retrospective data to be useful for grant seekers trying to develop grant funding strategies. To capture what is happening right now in grant making and philanthropy, we have assessed Q1 activities and results January through March 2025. Among the hundreds of grant writers in our programs and the thousands of nonprofits that they serve, in Q1 of 2025, our students have secured more than $16 million in grant funding and more than $1.5 million in their freelance grant writing businesses. Amazing. This suggests several major takeaways. Nonprofits are continuing to pursue grant funding and are hiring grant writers to help because they've been receiving grant awards, but they've also been receiving contracts with clients. So foundation funding has not dried up at all, but those with existing relationships may be in a stronger position right now, but that does not mean you should not start to develop those relationships. Going forward, we'll be monitoring whether and how competition for foundation grant funding increases due to decline in government grants. Because everyone's saying it's going to happen, but at the same time, what I've been seeing is people are peopling, and guess what? Some are getting paralyzed and not even moving forward, and others are doubling down and moving forward in grants and other strategies and building relationships. The ones that are doubling down and building relationships, even in these times, are going to be the ones that are going to succeed and sustain over the long haul, even when things change in the future. They're developing that type of culture where they're saying, our problems exist, we need funding, we need support, this needs to be more than political, it needs to be community-based. That's what we're going to see them have long-term sustainability because of decisions that they make today. Expert tips to navigate changing trends in philanthropy in 2025. While there's some aspects about the future of philanthropy, grant funding, and the nonprofit sector in general, it feels very uncertain right now. There are several steps grant writers and fundraisers can take to increase their chance of successfully securing foundation grant dollars, right? We need to prioritize grant funding for core needs and programs. Another thing is you need to be highly focused on what needs to be funded this year and what programs have the biggest impact. Another thing, you need to determine funding priorities before you even do the grant research. Don't chase the money right now. No. Don't mission drift by applying for a grant just because the opportunity is well funded. Like, they have money, let's go over there. Even if you're not aligned, you're going to be mission drifting. Ensure alignment with foundation priorities. That is so important. And when you do grant prospecting, spend extra time getting to know the funding source first. Read their website, look through their 990s. You can look at that in Candid, or if you use Instrumental, right? See what other nonprofits they fund. Does it really align? Does it really align with your nonprofit or your organization? When I first started writing grants, many foundations were not even online. So now it is so easy to use grant prospecting tools like Instrumental, Grant Station, and other places where you can find foundations at the click of a button, including their funding cycles, 990s, websites, contact information, all of the things, right? Everything. I remember used to have to drive to DC to find international prospects. And I'd have to look through books that were super outdated. Like, things have gotten easy, even if everything feels hard right now. There are still things that have become much easier in our day. And of course, follow all grant application guidelines. You need to write high quality grants right now. You also need to respond to their criteria properly. And most foundations will have a set of grant deadlines. Some you fill out online applications, while others require an email application. You need to figure out what that is and submit it properly. Your very first step in preparing a grant application should be to study the individual grant guidelines closely. Pay attention to the questions asked and how they are worded, along with format, word count, or character count requirements. Don't be cute and try to hand in something that goes outside of these requirements. Don't try to be whimsical and create something like this whole thing stapled together with flowers. No. Adding things like pictures to your proposal isn't necessarily helpful and actually may automatically get you rejected for not following the guidelines. So you still need to adhere. And of course, write high quality grants. If the competitiveness of grant applications increases and you say, yes, now all the foundations are inundated with all these applications, guess what? You want to be submitting the highest quality grant proposal possible in the best alignment. So follow a grant template process like we have inside our Freelance Grant Writer Academy. Our framework is a master grant template application. Make sure that you have a competitive advantage compared to others. We spent decades refining this grant template process so that you can write the highest quality grants that score the best, right? To win the grants. Inside our Freelance Grant Writer Academy, in addition to our world-class grant training, we also offer unlimited grant reviews. You can have your grants reviewed as many as you want by our co-coaches or experts before you submit them. That is key to having high converting grant applications. And of course, building relationships with foundations. So that's important. If a nonprofit organization already has a relationship or a history with a foundation, reach out to them and ask them how they intend to continue to support you during these times. Like I mentioned, there's people in our programs that said, oh my gosh, my clients are just, their foundations are coming to them as well and saying, how can we support you? But if they haven't come to you, I say reach out to those foundations. Let them know how they can support your nonprofit if you're currently getting funding. But I know some of you don't have those relationships yet. So build relationships. How do you do that? You can invite them to your fundraisers. Ask for 10 minutes of a board meeting to present about your nonprofit. Follow and engage with foundations on social media and so much more. Really get to know them. And you'd be like, that's so many. Honestly, just pick the best ones that are alignment and do that with. The more connected you are to foundations, the more you will be able to stay ahead of grant funding trends while also building long-term funding relationships. And of course, keep writing grants. With a pullback in federal funding for grants, many people are assuming that foundations, right, they're just going to be so overwhelmed. However, in reality, we're also seeing nonprofit organizations pull back. As I mentioned, they're getting paralyzed, right? And they're not seeking grant funding right now. Why? Because they're people. And with all the front page news on federal grants, they're thinking that grants are not the best way forward, maybe. And maybe not, that's not the best way to secure funding. But this couldn't be further from the truth. There are still many grant funding opportunities out there. The fear of the sector being saturated may have some validity. We're going to follow the data. But it doesn't mean there isn't funding for your organization right now because people are winning grants every day in our programs. We know it's true that there's still grants out there. Here's a recap on what we discussed. Prioritize your funding needs. Research grant opportunities. Ensure strong alignment with foundation priorities and submit the highest quality proposals. Philanthropy and grant trends for 2025 are still evolving. Yes, 2025 has already brought significant shifts in funding, philanthropy, and nonprofit fundraising, and nonprofit fundraising strategy. These could be temporary shifts or long-term shifts, or the landscape could shift and change again. The good news is that those working in the grant funding field are continuing to get positive results for nonprofit clients. For those of you who are grant writers or want to be, make sure you check out our Freelance Grant Writer Academy, where we continue to support grant writers and nonprofits in growing their funding even in 2025.